Welcome to Motive and Malice, where we explore the most audacious stories from Ireland's criminal and political history. Today, we're taking you back to Halloween 1973 for an escape so bold it became the stuff of legend. The words you see on screen, "Close the gates, close the fucking gates," that was the panicked shout of a prison guard, completely bewildered by what he was seeing in the exercise yard of Dublin's most famous prison. Because on that Halloween afternoon, something impossible was unfolding right before his very eyes. This is the story of the Mountjoy helicopter escape. So, how on earth did they pull it off? Okay, so picture the scene. It's Mountjoy Prison, D-Wing. Prisoners are out in the yard, some are just kicking a football around. It's just a damp, pretty ordinary autumn day in Dublin. And then, in a heartbeat, everything changes. Well, the first reaction on the ground was just pure confusion. The sight was so bizarre, so completely out of nowhere, that one of the prison officers on duty genuinely thought it was the Minister for Defense, Paddy Donegan, dropping in for a surprise visit. He was kind of known for using helicopters. But yeah, this was no government official. The second that helicopter swooped in, absolute bedlam broke out. See, the prisoners knew exactly what was happening. They immediately swarmed the 8 guards in the yard, overpowering them, holding them down, and as the chopper touched down for just a few seconds, 3 men, Seamus Tolmie, J.B. O'Hagan, and Kevin Mallon, scrambled aboard. And just like that, they were up and they were gone. The entire operation took less than 60 seconds. Just listen to that eyewitness account. It really highlights the unbelievable skill involved. You have to remember, the pilot, Captain Thompson Boyes, was being held at gunpoint. And yet he managed to navigate this incredibly tight space, surrounded by high walls, with the weight of 3 extra men. To lift off and clear that wall by just 5 or 10 feet, well, that's nothing short of miraculous flying. It was audacious, it was precise, and it was perfectly executed. But to really get your head around why the IRA would go to such extraordinary movie-like lengths, we need to take a step back and look at the political climate at the time. Who were these men, and why was the state so hell-bent on keeping them locked up? So the early 70s were right at the height of the Troubles. Things like the introduction of internment without trial up north and the absolute horror of Bloody Sunday led to a massive surge in recruitment for the IRA. Down south, the final Gael government, led by Liam Cosgrave, took a really hardline law and order stance, cracking down hard on any and all Republicans. And this is what Seamus Tolmie, the IRA chief of staff, said at his trial. He called it a British-orientated Quisling court, and a Quisling is basically a traitor, a collaborator. See, men like him were being tried in these special juryless courts, and you could be thrown in prison just for being a member of the IRA. So for Republicans, this wasn't justice. It was just political internment with a different name, and they completely refused to recognize the legitimacy of the courts that were sentencing them. Okay, so with their leadership now behind bars, the IRA needed a plan. And the one they came up with, well, it was straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster. The plan was just so meticulous. It all started with a fella with an American accent calling himself Mr. Leonard, who hired a helicopter for what he claimed was a photography shoot. Once they were up in the air, the pilot was told to land in this remote field. That's when the trap was sprung. 2 armed men appeared, took control, and told the pilot that if he followed their orders, he wouldn't be harmed. They made him fly low, really low, following canals and railway lines to stay off the radar, all the way to the very heart of Dublin's most secure prison. So the escape itself? A flawless success. But the fallout? As the news started to break and the reality of what just happened began to sink in, well, that's just as compelling as the escape itself. Look, this wasn't just a local story that made the Irish papers. It went global. The New York Times, the LA Times, they were all covering it. The sheer nerve of it just captured the world's imagination. But for Taoiseach Liam Cosgrave's government, which had basically built its entire reputation on being tough on the IRA, it was a moment of absolute profound humiliation. And the political fallout was immediate. The opposition, Fianna Fáil, led by Jack Lynch, had an absolute field day. In the Dáil debate the very next day, they wasted no time in mocking the government for its incompetence, pointing out the irony that a minister who loved using helicopters was now being embarrassed by one. You just couldn't make it up. This created this huge gap between the official reaction and the popular one. On the one hand, you had the government absolutely furious, and they immediately banned the Wolfe Tones' hastily written tribute, The Helicopter Song, from being played on RTE. But on the other hand, the public absolutely loved it.
The song just shot to #1, selling a staggering 12,000 copies in its first week. The escape had instantly become the stuff of folklore.
The state's response was, as you can imagine, a massive show of force. A combined total of 20,000, that's right, 20,000 Irish Defence Forces and Gardaí were mobilized in one of the biggest manhunts in the history of the state. The Taoiseach, Liam Cosgrave, went on record saying there would be no hiding place for the escapees. But after all the headlines faded and the song eventually dropped from the charts, what was the real long-term legacy of this incredible escape?
Well, despite that enormous manhunt, freedom for the three men was pretty temporary. Kevin Mallon was caught just a few months later at a GAA dance, of all places. J.B. O'Hagan was picked up in 1975. But Seamus Twomey, the IRA chief of staff, the big prize, he managed to stay on the run for over 4 years. He was a constant thorn in the government's side until he was finally caught after a dramatic car chase through Dublin in 1977.
So, while they all ended up back in a cell eventually, in many ways the escape achieved its most important goal. It was a spectacular propaganda victory. For Republicans, it was this huge morale boost. It was a defiant message that they couldn't be held, that they could strike right at the heart of the state's prison system. It completely energized their movement and, at the same time, deeply embarrassed the authorities. The Mountjoy escape is still one of the most daring in all of Irish history. But how should we remember it? Was it a daring blow for political freedom against what they saw as an oppressive state? Or was it a reckless criminal act that endangered lives? Well, the answer, like so much of our history, probably depends on who you ask. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe to Motive and Malice for more.